All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started here in a few minutes, so if you could find your seats, please. Get started here in just a few minutes. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of San Jose State Athletics, I want to be the first to welcome you and thank you for coming to a celebration of just a wonderful individual Lawrence fan. We have a list of tremendous speakers today, and we're going to start with the interim president of San Jose State, Dr. Steve Perez.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Perez. I have the honor of serving as the interim president here at San Jose State. I'm here to welcome you. Thank you for being here. How many of you are Spartans? Raise your hand. If you keep your hands up, please. Even if you're not, how many of you have been impacted by a Spartan? Well, I'm going to say it's a day of sorrow for the Spartan community. But it's also a great day. It's a great day because we're here together. We're here together to celebrate somebody who impacted numerous lives. This is a great university. It's because it's made up of great people. The top of the list is Lawrence Fan. He lived his life caring about people and making other people's lives better off. I really appreciate you being here to celebrate him, but I also want to challenge you to go out and follow his example, care for other people, and every day try to make somebody else's life better off. Once again, thank you. Thank you for being here. Welcome, and welcome home. Now I want to introduce our athletic director, Jeff Konya. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Perez. First of all, I appreciate each and every one of you being here today as we remember our Hall of Famer, our beloved friend, Lawrence Fan. And he was a Hall of Famer. He was a Hall of Famer in work, life, and especially how he treated people. It's important that we're gathered here today, here at CEFCU Stadium, because part of Lawrence's legacy is here with us today. Lawrence Fan worked 501 straight Spartan football games. And he worked with thousands and thousands of student athletes, coaches, staff, and he had the respect of the industry that he worked with in intercollegiate athletics, a Hall of Famer in COSIDA. The man bled blue and gold, and he will be sorely missed. At this time, I want to turn the mic over to our MC for today's event, and that again is Justin Allegri, the voice of the Spartans. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning. I'm Justin Allegri. I've been the broadcaster here at San Jose State for close to a decade now. It's a tremendous honor to be here today to celebrate someone that had so much passion for this university and for the people around him, and to celebrate his loyalty and, yes, his quirkiness for San Jose State, and that man that we all came to know and love. I've had the pleasure of speaking tons of events in front of many people at my time here at San Jose State, but this is the first that I can't lock eyes with Lawrence in the back of the room. It's the first time that I'm not going to see the waving hands, gesturing, the orchestra, in the back. Or the worst one you could get, which we all have had at some point. When I think of Lawrence, it's mostly those late night conversations in the office, sharing laughs, sharing stories, and taking in all the wisdom he had in a single finger every time. There aren't many people on this earth that you can think about that has a 30-second conversation with you that you remember for a lifetime. But there are hundreds of conversations in 30 seconds that I'll never forget with Lawrence. He was always the consummate professional. His three-piece suit, his wild introductions, the smallest interactions made you feel the most special. Through all of that, though, he was the most modest about himself, and any time you tried to give that man a compliment, he would turn it around right back on you. Today, he would be proud that you're all here, but humbled that you're here for him. We have a wonderful list of speakers today, and in their own way will honor Lawrence. Many of them with unique relationships that they've had in different work lives. We're going to start that, though, with his brother, Stephen Fan.
Excuse me for a minute. Okay. Good morning to all. Lawrence Tang Fan is the firstborn son of C. Doc Fan and Hang Fa Fan. He was born on September 9th, 1954. Numerically, you could say 9954, because it's appropriate that today, April 9th, 2022, it is the 99th day of this year. And I thank San Jose State for choosing this day to honor my brother. He was born at St. Francis Memorial Hospital in San Francisco. His younger siblings, Stephen and Lillian, were born in later years, and they were raised in their home on top of one of the city's hills. Lawrence was brought to the Telegraph Hill Nursery School, where he became friends with Ted Gross and Tom Paratori. Afterward, he attended Sherman Elementary School. His love for sports was sparked when we had a subscription to the San Francisco Examiner newspaper, and he would ask our father's tenant for the San Francisco Chronicle Sporting Green. He would also subscribe to the Sporting News newspaper and promptly absorb all the latest details on every sport he could analyze. Lawrence always took the leadership role as the oldest sibling. Our mother had said that while I was an infant, Lawrence would playfully pull me by the heels and drag me on my back, with both of us laughing as I was being pulled along. He would improvise different objects to simulate different sports in our house. We would use the 76 styrofoam balls and a wiffle bat for playing indoor baseball, and he would use his mitt to grab two balls. One of them was brand new, and the other one beat up. The beat up one was used for throwing fastballs, and the new one was used as a knuckleball that I couldn't determine which one he was throwing. For indoor miniature golf, an empty Tinker Toy can was used as a receiver for putting the golf balls on the hallway carpet. And After he would putt his set of golf balls, he would use the vacuum cleaner and run it diagonally and crisscross different ways to make the carpet take the golf ball in different directions. He observed the way Jerry Lucas, the former basketball power forward, would shoot his muscle shot and would show me how to shoot the basketball in that style so it wouldn't be so susceptible to being blocked. He taught me how to bowl with the four-step approach. Lawrence showed early signs of directing sports during elementary school. The vice principal of his school appointed him commissioner of the kickball league, where he would take charge of scheduling all the teams so that each one could have an equal number of games. And he kept statistics and standings of all the teams throughout the season. So he had a fondness for all sports and sports entertainment. So we would devote every Saturday to watch ABC's Wide World of Sports, and he would emulate their announcers such as Howard Cosell and Jim McKay. He would have me accompany him to a room in secret with my father's portable TV, and away from my father without his approval, we would tune in for NWA wrestling, lucha libre, roller derby with the Bay Bombers featuring Charlie O'Connell and Joan Weston, and roller games featuring Buddy Atkinson Jr. He would get tickets from the Christopher milk cartons to redeem for free San Francisco Warrior tickets to watch their games at San Francisco Civic Auditorium. Excuse me. Lawrence had a varied range of musical tastes, ranging from Arthur Fiedler and Lawrence Welk to Johnny Cash and Glenn Campbell, with the ultimate disdain for Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck. At Lowell High School, Lawrence was commissioner of his flag football league, and he had football plays on index cards that he designed for his team's success. He was seen reprimanding his friends or teammates if they failed to execute properly, but he was also gracious to them during their many victories. The varsity football coach was impressed with Lawrence's knowledge of the game, although he was not on the varsity team. And the coach asked me 3 years later, after he graduated, when I was at Lowell, if I had Lawrence's index cards containing those very plays. Lawrence was also involved with Lowell's forensics. He won several debate awards during his time, and he developed that monotone acumen and always had the quick wit to respond to any challenge. He also had a part-time job during his youth at the Golden Gate Valley Public Library, and he was the classic verbal enforcer of library protocol. Our parents were determined excuse me, to allow each one of us to pursue our dreams and maximize our talents. My mother had both Lawrence and myself take summer programs at the DeYoung Museum and the Randall Jr. Museum of San Francisco to refine our skills. Through our childhood years, they afforded us the opportunities to proceed through graduate and professional education. Lawrence with athletic administration, Lillian in dietetics, and myself in dentistry. He graduated from UC Berkeley with a bachelor's degree in economics, although he started out initially as a math major at Berkeley. He received his master's degree from Western Illinois University in Macomb, Illinois. He proceeded to his first sports information job at Frostburg State University in Maryland, then served as sports information director at LaSalle University in Philadelphia. After serving on the East Coast for some time, Lawrence decided to come home, and fortuitously, the position at San Jose State became available. He was an active member of the Chinese Community Church choir in his youth, donning the choir robes and singing bass. He once wrote a testimony based on Matthew 5:14, that one should be the light of the world. A light from the city on the hill cannot be hidden. The Bible also says in Luke 11:35-36, see to it then that the light within you is not darkness. Therefore, if your whole body is full of light and no part of it dark, it will be just as full of light as when a lamp shines its light on you. Lawrence had his own light shine out in his own way, touching the lives of his many contacts, whether it was athletes, students, coaches, media personnel, or others. And I am honored to be called once again the little brother of Lawrence Tang Fan and Spartan Up.
I'm Lillian, Lawrence's youngest sibling and only sister. I never really knew Lawrence well when we were growing up as kids, since we were born 9 years apart. It wasn't until the summer of 1980, which probably marked the beginning of our relationship. I had been accepted to San Jose State University, and although I graduated from Lowell High School in San Francisco in a class of 804, only 3 of us were planning on attending San Jose State. One girl who got into the dorms, one guy, and myself. I hadn't got into the dorms and had no roommate possibilities. I even tried to find housing in the International House, but was not successful. Trying to avoid my lack of housing situation, I announced to my parents that I was going to book a pleasant Hawaiian holiday and spend the week in Waikiki. When I returned home, Lawrence was at home. I asked him, "What are you doing here?" He told me he moved back home. I asked him, "How about your job in Philadelphia?" He said, "I got a new job." I then asked him, "Where?" He replied, "San Jose State." I told him, "I'm going to San Jose State." And he told me to go find an apartment. I said, "Where?" He said, "Near campus." I asked, "How much do we spend?" And he said, "Doesn't matter." I then asked, "How many bedrooms?" And he said, "2," and held up 2 backward fingers. This began our lives as Spartans. Our parents offered to pay for my living expenses, but Lawrence insisted on paying for my living expenses as a thank you to our parents for funding his undergraduate and his graduate studies. Doing the math, Lawrence was just shy of 26 years old. I'm very certain that our rent was a significant percentage of his San Jose State salary, especially since we lived in one of 2 nearby apartments that had a swimming pool and an elevator. Nonetheless, no complaints from Lawrence, who paid for my living expenses for 5 years. A couple of years after I graduated from San Jose State, Lawrence decided to move away from campus and purchased a townhome. Since I had just started working, I gifted Lawrence with a sofa and a love seat for his new home. To this day, 37 years later, Lawrence had the same sofa and love seat, unsoiled and unworn. Lawrence loved the people he worked with and loved the work he did at San Jose State University and through his other professional organizations. I remember during football season, he would frequently work 18 or more hours a day, 7 days a week. I've heard stories that the custodial staff would tell him he had to go home so they could clean. And Lawrence, instead, would go out to his car for a few hours and then return back to the office in the middle of the night. I remember when I was invited to my first black and white formal wedding, and I wasn't sure if I was going to attend because I didn't have a fancy dress to wear. Lawrence gifted me with a dress of my choice without budgetary constraints. I think one of the pivotal moments in our relationship was at my wedding rehearsal dinner. Our father, being a traditional Chinese father, told me in front of friends and family that the next day I would no longer be part of the family. I was in tears and paralyzed, and Lawrence immediately and securely embraced me and told my father to leave me alone. That was when I knew that when Lawrence spoke, it was direct, intentional, and purposeful. Lawrence always made time to come and support my 3 children's activities, whether it was a piano recital, church children's musical, baseball game, gymnastics meet, or his favorite, graduations. As we grew older, it was time for my children to support their uncle, as my son Daniel and I got to witness his induction into the COSIDA Hall of Fame in St. Louis in 2012. And my 2 daughters, Sarah and Hannah, got to witness his receiving the COSIDA Trailblazer Award the following year in Orlando. Over the past decade, Lawrence and I took over the financial and medical responsibilities of our aging parents. We tag team care for our parents, I during the day and Lawrence at night. We worked well together, with Lawrence always encouraging our parents to do their exercises and be well and make it to the next Christmas, the next New Year's, the next trip to Hawaii, and to the next 49er Super Bowl. Although we spoke to each other several times a week, we missed out a lot on family dinners over the past 3 years. I know that Lawrence was trying to protect me prior to and during the pandemic. Since Lawrence had a lot of exposures to the public, he would come to my house in San Francisco and talk to me from a distance at my front yard, toting a can of Lysol spray, wearing a mask, and not coming inside to eat or drink. He would check in on me and my health status, but never addressed or tended to his own. When asked about retirement, he would tell me that he would be better off financially retiring than continuing to work. Despite this, there was no retirement in sight. Lawrence had a high level of responsibility to the people he worked with, student athletes, mentees, colleagues, and professional organizations. My daughter Sarah noted that her Uncle Lawrence had an impactful career. People may think that Lawrence loved his job, but the reality is he loved the people. Reflecting on the sudden and unexpected passing of Lawrence causes me to look at how I live. I find myself seeking to make a greater difference, to leave a spiritual legacy, and to live to make a deeper, eternal impact each day. With Easter approaching, I am reminded that my source of comfort is in what Jesus accomplished on the cross, defeating sin and death and resurrecting on the 3rd day. This is my hope as I trust in him during these tough times. I would like to close with special thanks to Wendy Dunn and Doug Osumi, who, when Lawrence did not show up for work on February 22nd, went to look for him at his home. For Wendy, who reached out to the San Francisco Police Department to do a well check at our family home, which ultimately led to our discovery of his unfortunate passing. To Mary Quintanar for being our go-to for all the details, planning, and information that was needed to bring this event to fruition. To Amy Villa for the longevity of a 28-and-a-half-year friendship that she shared with Lawrence and our family, along with providing access and insight to our family to get the information we needed to get through these past few weeks. And to Scott McDonald for his role in supporting and orchestrating such an honorable celebration of Lawrence. Thank you, and aloha.
Hello, my name is Tom Paratori, and I went to Telegraph Hill Nursery School in San Francisco's North Beach neighborhood with Lawrence. Then my family moved away for a few years, and when we returned, I once again was a schoolmate of Lawrence's at Sherman School in San Francisco in the early and mid-1960s. Our school was made up of a diverse group of students and included kids bussed in from around the city. Lawrence lived about 3 blocks from me on Russian Hill, and we were fast friends right away because of our interest in sports. Imagine 2 young boys between the ages of 7 and 12 who read the San Francisco Chronicle Sporting Green during the time of local sports heroes Willie Mays, Juan Marichal, Willie McCovey, Wilt Chamberlain, John Brody, and the list goes on. We were in our element. We even went to a few of the 49er games at Kezar Stadium when kids could get in by cutting out a ticket on the Christopher milk carton and sit in the end zone. And I'm pretty sure Lawrence was with me in October 1964 when Jim Marshall of the Minnesota Vikings picked up a fumble and ran the wrong way, and thinking he had scored a touchdown, spiked the ball, only resulting in a safety. That run has been listed among the NFL's greatest plays. So living in that environment in the 1960s, Lawrence was well on his way to becoming a sports encyclopedia. While I was quite active in the school's team sports, Lawrence was well behind the scenes a mover and shaker, scheduling and attending most of the games. Last month, a group of us, mostly friends of Lawrence's from Marina Junior High and Lowell High School, got together and celebrated the essence of Lawrence. One of his friends said that they all played and dreamed of being involved in sports in some way, but Lawrence actually lived that dream and made it his vocation. I'm sure there are those of you here today that are well aware of Lawrence's dedication, care, and loyalty to his job. Lawrence was selfless and always took care of others. He was a true company man. So remember the boy, then the man, Lawrence Fan, who gave his all to those around him. If only Lawrence could be here today, he would have a big smile on his face to be remembered this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'm glad you mentioned the smile, because every one of us knows that sometimes getting emotion out of Lawrence was a tall order. But to this day, I still don't know if he was joking or serious at times, unless you heard, "No, seriously." And that's how you knew. Some of the best memories were of him proudly proclaiming a stat or a story or a note and then giving that beaming smile that he was just so delighted he could provide just a piece of information to the room or to the person. Now, most of that involved stats about San Jose State. Some of those stats were for our next speaker, head coach of our football team, Brent Brennan.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Brent Brennan. I'm the head football coach here. It's awesome to see all these people here celebrating the legendary Lawrence Fan. Lawrence Fan is everything that's right about college athletics. He exemplified loyalty, hard work, how to respect others, and totally invest in people. It didn't matter who you were. He was dedicated to his work. He loved his student athletes, his coaches, and San Jose State University. Quite honestly, there will never be another Lawrence Fan. They just don't make them like that anymore. He was perfectly authentic, perfectly human, perfectly Lawrence. He gave to others without ever wanting anything in return. I mean, just think about the concept of fan cakes. Like who does that? Like really, like I'm gonna bake a couple thousand fan cakes over the next 20 years the night before a basketball game for the visiting media. It's just insane. And also brilliantly Lawrence. He was this magical mix of humor, consistency, hard work, and love. I have so many great stories of Lawrence, and I appreciate all the student athletes that are here celebrating this great man, because I know it was early for you guys to get up on a Saturday. But we are getting ready for, in 2020, we have this magical season, and we're undefeated, and we're going to a bowl game. And we come home for first bowl game in a long time, right? And so we come home and for Christmas, and we get wiped out by COVID. And so the amount of time I spent with Lawrence discussing how much we were going to disclose to the media was hours. And he was gently pushing me, wait, I think you should share. No. I told him no. I don't want this to be about COVID. I want this to be about this team. I want to be about San Jose State University. But we were down 26 players, 3 coaches, a couple administrators, and the day was not a great day on the field. And this is where Lawrence showed up for me in the most magical way. After we were in the tunnel, and he's like, "Are you ready to talk to the media?" And I looked at him, and I just started crying hard, just me and him. And he put his hand on my shoulder and let me cry for a minute. And then he put his other hand on my shoulder. You know how he would do that? And it's really pretty close for me to be to Lawrence. But I was overcome with emotion. And I kept crying, and then finally he just said, he gave up and he went in for the full hug. This super awkward man hug in the tunnel of Arizona Stadium as I'm bawling my eyes out with this legendary sports information director, Lawrence Fan. It was magic. We miss him every day. I miss his friendship. I miss his support. Our team misses his instruction and his leadership and the work he did with them, teaching them how to cooperate and work effectively with the media. He was an incredible human being in every way, and we love him dearly. This here is a helmet from San Jose State Athletics for the family in honor of Lawrence and everything he meant to all of us and our football team. If y'all would please come up.
space? I can move. Sorry.
That's all right. We have everybody up?
I need to scoot further.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just
Okay.
scoot over a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, watch out. All right. Okay.
Smile.
We good?
Okay, we good now?
Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Mark Spears. I'm with the sports writer with ESPN's Anscape, and thank you for being here. I'm a San Jose State grad who joined the basketball team in 1993, and I also wrote for the Spartan Daily. And it was there that I was able to build a unique relationship with Lawrence, more so than just being an athlete, because I needed him to do interviews for the Spartan Daily on the football team. So their football coach at the time was a legend named John Ralston. So I get Lawrence to get me interviews with him. They had this quarterback, I think you guys remember, named Jeff Garcia. I used to ask Lawrence to hook me up with him, and he would always do it. And then over the years, as I became a sports writer, I was still bugging Lawrence for interviews. I was like, hey, can you get me Dr. Harry Edwards? Yeah. And Dr. Edwards knows if Lawrence calls, he trusts that whoever he tells him to call, he'll call him back. He would get me in touch with John Carlos, Tommy Smith. And for those that have met those guys, they don't trust everybody. But if Lawrence called and told them you should talk to him, they would do it. That was the respect that Lawrence had. And every time I would come to a football game or a basketball game, as either a fan or a reporter, I always had to make that pilgrimage to that press box and talk to him. And he always had that same outfit on, man. Y'all know that vest, you know, those slacks, the glasses. And every once in a while, some former player would walk by and he'd be like, Terry Cannon, 1990 Crenshaw High School, All-State. Like, he was a computer before computers. Like, I swear, like, every athlete that's played here, I don't care if you were all-conference or you never played but one game. He knew who you were and your background, and he was analytics before analytics. Thanks to Jeff Kanye, the athletic director here, is doing a great job. He gave me this amazing opportunity to do color analyst work with the basketball programs for the first time in my career. So I did a couple games, and the first game was a game on January 25th where the men's team lost to Air Force. And before the game, it was like Lawrence knew when I was showing up, man. He was there. He gave me a bottle of water, and he had this little plastic container with some fan cake in it. It had my name on it like a sticker that said Mark Spears. I was like, wow. And, you know, my wife's here, and she don't like me talking about food being as big as I am. But, man, fan cake is good, man. Like I'm telling y'all, like, I try to describe it. Sorry. But it had this hint of cinnamon. And talked to his brother. He don't know the recipe. Lawrence didn't leave the recipe. And but San Jose State got to figure out how to get that recipe because the media is expecting that cake still. So I came to a game on the 23rd of February. It was an early 11 a.m. game, and there's no fan cake, there's no water. It's an early game, though. It's like 10:30. I'm like, where's Lawrence at? It's odd because, you know, he's always the first one that comes, but I'm like, it's 11 a.m. game. So I had to focus, do the women's game. And then afterwards, Jeff and Amy were waiting on me. I was like, what's going on? Why are they waiting on me? Am I in trouble? I felt like I was back in school in trouble for something. And they said, hey, we need to talk. And the look in Amy's eyes and her tears, like I knew, without them telling me. So, as you can see, I love that bad. That was my guy. You know, wherever I went across the country, people always say, you know, when they found out I went to San Jose State, you know Tommy Smith? Yeah, I met him. You know John Carlos? Yeah. Dr. Harry Edwards? Yeah. But the name I always heard the most was Lawrence Fan, the sports information director. You know Lawrence? Have you had fan cake? Oh, man, it's amazing. So, I mean, it showed the respect of this man who I believe had to be the first Asian to be a sports information director in the country, not just Chinese, but Asian, which means he was one of the first people of color. So he was a groundbreaking person as well. The fact that everywhere I go, somebody mentioned his name showed that the love and respect that, you know, he wasn't at a Power 5 school, but you knew who he was, and the sports world respected him. And the respect I saw at the highest level for him, because oftentimes I would see him at NCAA tournament games when I covered them, whether in San Jose or Oakland or San Francisco with his vest on, you know, and he would sneak some fan cake there too, you know. Coach K was about to speak in the media room. This is a national thing, big deal, Sweet 16. And then they had a memorial for Lawrence right there with 2 boxes of fan cake. I don't know where they got the recipe from, but they made it. And I went and made sure I snuck a piece before I went and listened to Coach K. And so to me, that just showed the love and respect that he had at the highest level. I love him and miss him, and my condolences to his family and the San Jose State family. Thank you.
Good morning, and thanks to the athletic department for including me today. Abraham Lincoln once said, "In the end, it's not the years in your life that count, it's the life in your years that matter." And as we celebrate Lawrence's life today, it occurs to me that he was the kind of person that put life in his years so often by unselfishly adding life to others. It's my belief that Lawrence was born with the ability and the purpose to change someone's life, and he never wasted it. He gave back unselfishly, and he was a trailblazer to our national organization and our profession. He was the face of our job seekers program, and he opened the door for hundreds of aspiring SIDs to launch their careers. He won practically every award that our organization gives. and he was very proud to be the first Chinese American to be inducted into our Hall of Fame. He was a strong voice who championed equity and diversity in our association, and he was among the founders of our Diversity and Inclusion Committee. He was so proud to carry the torch in leading the way when Dr. Harry Edwards was inducted into our Academic All-America Hall of Fame. For me, Lawrence's last name was a representation of what he was all about. He was everyone's biggest fans. He impacted so many people in our profession, and he had great friends across the spectrum of college athletics. To illustrate, let me identify a few of his colleagues and co-scholarship friends who are here today and have them stand. First, there is Jack Newman, retired SID from Canada. Charlie Fiss, retired communications director from the Cotton Bowl here from Phoenix, Arizona. Max Corbett, former COSIDA president here from Boise, Idaho. Rosa Gaddy, also a trailblazer in our profession, the very first communications director officer from ESPN, who flew here from Florida. Tim Tessalone, legendary SID from USC, who recently retired. Bob Vasquez, a longtime friend of Lawrence, retired from the profession, who's here from San Diego. And Bill Powers, SID, here from Hawaii. And myself, here from Tucson, Arizona. Sometimes you don't recognize the true value of a moment till it becomes a memory. We all traveled back here to talk about our memories of Lawrence. Last night, Jack, Charlie, Max and his wife, Rosa, Bob and myself assembled at Original Joe's Italian restaurant, Lawrence's favorite, for dinner and to remember our friend and share stories. Symbolically, we left a vacant seat at the table. Lawrence was all about getting things done. He got so much mileage out of his life. He worked over 500 consecutive games. He often put in 80-hour work week. He estimated to me that he made over 900 fan cakes since he loaded that first one in the oven. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that he got the most mileage out of his cars. He had a 1978 Ford Granada that once got 412,000 miles until the engine burned up in front of his office. He also told me at the time I talked to him, he was driving a 2000 Oldsmobile Intrigue that had crossed the 345,000-mile barrier. I first met Lawrence at our national convention, and the last time we saw each other in person was at our last live national convention. In between, he was always there for me or anyone who needed him, and that's what distinguished him. He never changed, and because of that, we'll all miss him greatly. I know I will. I'll close with another quote, this one from T.S. Eliot, that in my mind sums up the legacy of Lawrence Fan. To do the useful thing, to say the courageous thing, to contemplate the beautiful thing, that is enough for one man's life. God bless Lawrence Fan. We are all so much better for having known him. Good morning. My name is Tom Bowen, and in 2004, I had a chance to work and serve with Lawrence Fan as the Director of Athletics at San Jose State University. Thank you, Jeff, and the administration here for letting me speak and asking me to speak. I appreciate it. And I would like to say a few words and a story about Lawrence, as there are thousands of stories. All of my other speakers have said amazing things about this man. And this man made an amazing impact in my life. I have kept in contact with Lawrence continually and saw him last on January 28th. And we talked about family, faith, our prayer, what we do for our others, what we do for our family and our siblings and the people we love. We talked about Arkansas State and every trivial piece I need to know about the athletes at Arkansas State, both present and past. And when I left, head back home, I said, if I had Lawrence Fan with me right now, we could do amazing things. And I could bring national attention. I could bring amazing media, social media, and everything he could do to a little tiny school in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Because he is a titan, and was a titan, and will always be a titan in sports administration, sports media, and SID. I was honored to serve with him. And every year, because I'll get to my story, because there have been a lot of speakers, and I concur what they say. But my favorite story about Lawrence is that every year, we would let him speak to the student athletes, and I assume he still does. And every year, it was the one day that he got to do stand-up comedy, live stand-up comedy. And every year, when I was here, our student athletes couldn't wait to watch Lawrence give his speech about how to deal with the media. My favorite, and there are several that I could tell, but my favorite is he walks out on the stage, he has a donut, glazed donut, and a can of Mountain Dew. And he's in his vest tie, as he always is. He walks up, sets the Mountain Dew on the podium, takes the donut, raises a can, and says to student athletes, when you're with the media, you do this. Sets it down. When you're with the media, you do not do this. And it went on and on and on. And then he says, if I catch you not doing this, grabs his tie, pulls it up, I'm gonna hang you with my tie. The kids went nuts, the place went nuts. He deadpanned, walked off the stage, and we never had a problem with the media because the kids knew what to do and what to do not. So I miss him. He talked to me all the time, gave me great advice in my career, and certainly how to deal with the media in cities far, far away from San Jose. And I always believed that Lawrence is one of those special human beings that you hardly ever can ever forget, but always will love in your heart forever. Lawrence his life was more than his work, but his work was more than his job. And he was amazing in what he did for everybody. And so today, I want to remember Lawrence, that all of us take to heart his gift of grace and random acts of kindness. God bless.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sierra Painter, and I am a former women's water polo player here at San Jose State, and I currently work within the athletics department. I can't even express how honored I am today to get up here to share my memories with Lawrence and celebrate the wonderful man that he was. To be completely honest, It was really hard for me to find the words to describe Lawrence. Not because there's nothing to say about Lawrence, trust me, there is plenty to say about Lawrence. But how can you describe one of the most humble, hardworking, quirky, kind, and genuine human beings in just a couple of minutes? The first time I met Lawrence was on the pool deck in 2015. Our coach was introducing our freshman class to Lawrence, or should I say our freshman class was getting introduced to Lawrence because he already knew who all of us were and where we came from. So when our coach introduced me, he said, "This is Sierra Painter," and Lawrence immediately said, "Leland High School." I was shocked because when you're a freshman, you're a small fish in a big pond. You don't expect someone within the athletics department to already know your name and what high school you played at. And that's exactly what Lawrence did to everyone. It was those little moments that made you feel special. And that's what he did for every student athlete. Everyone felt special and seen, whether you were a star recruit, a walk-on, or a transfer student. In my introduction to Lawrence, my coach also shared that my nickname was Spaz, and I earned that from my playing style, but Lawrence was immediately drawn back and confused. Why would you ever have a nickname for a student as Spaz? Because Lawrence was always about projecting student athletes in the best light, putting the spotlight on them, making them feel the best. So after all the introductions went through, Lawrence came over to me. He leaned over, put his hands on his hips, and he said, "I'm gonna get you a new nickname. I don't know what it is yet, but I'll get back to you." And as a freshman, I'm like, okay, and kind of laughed it off and didn't really think much about that. But the next time Lawrence came walking onto that pool deck, he had a new nickname for me. And he came up to me, again, hands on the hips, a little bit of a 45-degree lean into it. Yeah, "I got your new nickname." And I'm like, "All right, let's hear it." And he goes, "Zaps. Do you know what Zaps is?" And as a freshman, I'm kind of freaking out, like, "Oh my gosh, do I need to know what Zaps is?" No, I don't know what it is. And he says, "It's Spaz backwards." And from then on, it stuck. That really started Lawrence and our friendship. And, we used to have our little own secret handshake. He'd come up to me and he'd point his finger out, and I'd come back over and we'd go zzz for Zaps. And I would sign off all my emails, Sierra Zaps Painter. And that's also how he introduced me to everyone, even after I was done playing. But it wasn't just Sierra Zaps Painter, it was Sierra Zaps Painter. He always made sure to emphasize that. But for almost every home game in my 6-year career, Lawrence was on the pool deck running the desk and announcing our games, even when we were playing at West Valley Junior College because the new pool was getting built. He would always come walking onto the pool deck at a 45-degree angle, man on a mission, hand down, pulling his crate, bucket hat on. You knew it was a Spartan game day if Lawrence was on the deck with his bucket hat on. After a tough loss, a poor personal performance, and at a time where you're down, you're devastated, and you're just straight up disappointed, Lawrence was there to support you, pick you right back up, lift your spirits, still get that post-game interview, and paint the game and the story into the best storyline possible. Even at the lowest points of my performance, Lawrence always found a way to make me smile. And that was one of Lawrence's superpowers. He made all student athletes here feel like superstars. We were not just our sport. We were not just college student athletes. We were his superstars. Speaking of Lawrence's superpowers, as mentioned before, he was the Spartan encyclopedia. He for sure knew more about my water polo career than I do. He could rattle off how many games I played, how many goals I scored, and also throw in another random fact just for fun, as easily as I could ask any of you, what color is the sky? But the most amazing thing is that he could do that for any student athlete, from any team, from any year. Again, making us all feel like superstars. One of the coolest things about joining the department after being a student athlete was getting to see Lawrence in action every day. and being just 4 doors down the hall from each other. As a student athlete, I always knew how hard Lawrence worked in the office every day, but you don't fully appreciate the extent of what Lawrence did until you see it for yourself. This man was in here so much, he knew the carpet cleaning schedule. Who knows that? Every morning, ever since I started, I was greeted the same way. I could hear Lawrence coming in because his loafers were shuffling on the carpet. I would see his head first because he always had his 45-degree lean in his walk. And I was greeted with a, "Hello, Sierra," every morning. To be honest, I'm still waiting for him to round the corner one more time. Even in moments where he was loaded with work, he would always stop to talk to me. We could be having a conversation and the phone would ring. And being just 4 doors down the hall and talking all the time, he could have told me, "Sierra, I gotta take this. I'll come back later." But he never did. He would always use his humor and turn the person on the other side of the phone away. So, for example, he would say, "I'm sorry, I have to call you back because I have a painter in the room who has to paint my walls." Or, "I have an electrician here because I keep getting zapped, so I'm gonna have to call you back." So if anyone was on the other side of the phone, it was me, I was the painter, I was the electrician, I'm sorry. But Lawrence always stopped to have a conversation, to listen, and was fully present and intentional with everyone he encountered. I always used to tell Lawrence, "It's always a good day when I get to see you, Lawrence." And he would say, "No, it's a good day because I get to see you." And that's classic Lawrence, never making it about himself or giving himself the credit. He was always shining the spotlight on others. One of the last conversations I had with Lawrence was on that Sunday night at the men's basketball game. He was making his rounds, dropping off his famous fan cake. He stopped by and he said, again, hands on the hips, leaning in, right? "Did you know I've known you for about a third of your life?" It stopped me in my tracks. We're like in the middle of a basketball game, and I'm like, what is he talking about? Really? Have you really known him for that long? It was a statistic. Why did I even question it? Obviously, he was right. That has to be the favorite statistic that he has ever shared with me, and one that I will never forget. I am so proud to have been a student athlete on a team that had Lawrence as their SID. And I am so grateful for the friendship that we developed over the past 6.5 years. He has and always will have a very special place in my heart. The pool deck, the press box, and San Jose State athletics will never be the same without him. Golf coach John Kennedy shared that Lawrence may have had the most appropriate last name out of any human being, and I couldn't agree more. Fan. That's exactly what he was. He was San Jose State's biggest fan and every student athlete's biggest fan. May we all be fans just like Lawrence in our lives, doing what we love, supporting and uplifting those around us, and enjoying some cake along the way too. I love you, Lawrence. Thank you for being you. Thank you.
We can go for days on all these stories, and there's still a lot to come. But right now, we're going to take a brief pause from our speakers. Direct your attention to the video board for a short video about Lawrence. I think it's very clear by now that Lawrence made a lasting impact, not because of the job he had, but because of the person he was. Our next presenter knew him very well, longtime friend and co-worker John Poach.
President Perez, Director Konya, fan family, thank you for the honor to be able to share some remarks today about our dear friend. Celebration of life. Has anyone been the pure epitome of a celebration of life than Lawrence? Every day he celebrated life. He was without a doubt the most observant, attentive, knowledgeable, and quirkiest man I have ever met. Compassionate and humble, tireless and always steady. He represents the best of what every Spartan wishes to be. With a contagious smile, quick wit, dry humor, infectious laugh, and respect for all, he turned heads every time he spoke. I like to believe that all Spartan Athletics staff members, student athletes, know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm fairly certain every Spartan alumnus knows too. The incomparable Lawrence fan. I first met Lawrence briefly in 1983 as a junior in the men's soccer team. I was here for the spring season. My player career didn't last long, but our friendship did. I returned to San Jose State in 1995 as a women's soccer coach, and the first person to greet me my first day on the job was Lawrence. And then he recalled a story from my coach, Julie Menendez, in 1983. How did he remember me 12 years later was my first thought. And this was just a sign of things to come in our friendship for over 25 years. Though I left athletics in 2017, we still spoke every other week to keep up with the latest of Spartan athletics, the San Jose Sports Authority, and then one of his favorites, the San Jose Sports Hall of Fame, which he'd been a member of the board for the past 25 years. Our last call, we discussed the well-deserved selection of Dick Vermeil to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. No one had more pride in student-athlete success, present or past Spartans, than Lawrence fan. With passionate San Jose State supporters, Lawrence was able to recite not only the last 40 years of football games, but also the stats, the plays, the weather, the date, the time in which the game took place. And that was not just limited to football. Pick a sport, and he had a story. And don't dare challenge the facts. Those who know, you know what I'm talking about. These are the moments I'll never forget. The fan man recollections. Unfathomable to most, was beyond a photographic memory. His ability to recall events, stats, people, and names was just amazing. This is something that only those that have it will ever understand. And I strongly believe, let me correct that, I mean, and I know, that Lawrence's memory was second to none. Just like the man himself, he was second to none. He literally worked day and night. His idea of vacation was attending the Sports Information Directors National Conference, COSIDA, to help write job descriptions, interview SID candidates for other schools, mentor new members of the industry, and this was his vacation. And Doug, I recalled the Oldsmobile because I drove with him to San Francisco. He didn't tell me the window didn't work in the passenger side. It was down the whole way. But Lawrence was second to none. Lawrence spent over 4 decades working behind the scenes for all the teams and athletic administrations at San Jose State. When I think of all of the projects, events, and accomplishments we achieved in this department, Lawrence was always instrumental, but always behind the scenes. He proofed every letter, every article, every proposal, and every event timeline, not just for me, but for anyone in the department, despite his busy schedule with 20 other teams. And he did so in the most professional manner imaginable. He was second to none. He knew everybody, but everyone wanted to know him. He was a kind and loving man. He lifted the spirits of everyone who worked at San Jose State, and not just in athletics. He eventually became a friend to everyone on every team. As you can see, there's a real sadness behind the scenes right now for everyone who was ever affiliated with San Jose State. Though he was with San Jose State for over 4 decades, he was still taken away way too soon. Lawrence Fan was a beloved colleague, not just for San Jose State, but as Coach Brennan said, for all of college athletics and the entire Bay Area sports community. In my acceptance speech this past fall at the San Jose State Athletics Hall of Fame, I recognize the role Lawrence played in my career, from a student athlete to a coach to administrator. And I thanked him, and I'm so glad I thanked him for his friendship, for his mentorship, and his ongoing support. I closed my speech that evening stating that I was looking forward to the day when Lawrence will be inducted. That day will come because, as I said, Lawrence was second to none. I know that San Jose State, the city of San Jose, San Jose Sports Authority, will all find ways to pay tribute to him for all that he has given to so many. But for now, my tribute to honor Lawrence is to be like him, to be the best co-worker I can be. Because just like Lawrence, he was second to none. May you rest in peace forever, my friend. Thank you.
I'm Amy Villa, and for the past 28 years, I've been able to call Lawrence Fan my boss, my coworker, my mentor, and my friend in my life. 28 years ago, Lawrence took a chance on an almost 22-year-old. See, he's already messed with the speech. He took a chance on a girl from Central Ohio who grew up on a dairy farm, who graduated from Capital University and brought her to the big city. Little did I know when I moved here to San Jose, Lawrence would change my life in so many ways. Lawrence is the reason that I met my husband. Derek came into the office in the first 2 months that I worked here, looking for a credential and looking to work on the basketball stat crew. 23 years later, we've been married. And because of Lawrence, we also have our daughter, Grace, who is a sophomore here at San Jose State University. And we're very proud that she's a legacy. He was always so proud of Grace and all the other kids that the staff members would bring by his office. He'd always have a toy or a book or something to share with every child that came by his office. He was also proud of all of his nieces and nephews. And I was always amazed. They always got a special day with Uncle Lawrence on their birthday, their choice of someplace to go. And if I remember correctly, the House of Prime Rib was a very popular place to go. Lawrence was always a champion for everyone else, taking pride and joy in publicizing all the good for student athletes, coaches, staff, alums of the university, and fellow colleagues all over this great country. He was proud of mentoring people, and he wanted people to recognize. Well, today, it's my opportunity to recognize Lawrence in a very special way. Lawrence, as we know, has been honored by COSIDA in many ways. And when we were going through things in his office, I found awards that no one has seen. The first award, his Hall of Fame accepted plaque from 2012. Lawrence kept it in a box underneath some football awards that we won. No one has seen it except for those people at the convention in 2012. Also in 2012, he won the Arch Award for the outstanding achievement in our profession. Again, in another box under another football award. In 2013, he won the Trailblazer Award, which recognized him as a mentor and a peer in our profession. A highly respected award, still in a box, still under another football award in his office. And the final, and maybe most prestigious awards that he won from COSIDA that isn't handed out every award was the President's Award, which honors exemplary volunteer services and leadership to our organization. And I thought it was appropriate today to show these awards that he had in boxes underneath football awards, because it wasn't about him. It was about the student athletes and everyone else. Thank you, babe. You want to take him? There are many moments like this that defined his 42 years at San Jose State. I picked 4 boxes, 4 scores that I think had an impact in his life, and being typical Lawrence, as he's ingrained in me, gender equity, 2 women's sports, 2 men's sports. I start with a 1984 box score from the volleyball Final Four. That team was special to him, as they are in the stands. He kept in touch with them. He was always sad when he would miss one of the reunions, as he enjoyed that team and being friends with them. And Krista Cook, thank you for showing this 22-year-old around San Jose when she came to the big city for the first time in her life. The next box score comes from the 1987 Women's Golf National Championship. The first of 3 national championships from the women's golf team that he got to publicize here at San Jose State University. And one of the players on that team, our own Dana Laughlin-Dorman, our current head coach, whose team just beat Stanford twice this year, and number 2 Oregon this past week. She's carrying on that legacy. And I know Lawrence was proud of Dana and proud of the women's golf program that he publicized. In the mid-2000s, Lawrence and I did a little switch. I took women's golf publicity, and that's when he became Mr. Water Polo SID. And he took that on with all the gusto that he would do when he would publicize football or men's basketball or any other sport here at San Jose State. This next box score changed the way we approach March Madness in our office. It's the 1996 Big West Men's Basketball Championship box score. We weren't supposed to win that game. We weren't even supposed to be in the championship game. And we won on Selection Sunday. And we got selected to play top-ranked Kentucky that week. Lawrence rushed back from Reno, spent 2 nonstop days getting prepared for the NCAA tournament. From that year on, there was always a plan. Whether we were 2-27 or 14-13, it didn't matter. What are we gonna do to get ready when we go to conference tournament and we come back winners? I'll meet you, I'll pick up the trophy, you guys get to work in the office. And I think that runs true to many people sitting here today, including Hung Sai, Dino Barr, Richard Stern, Dominic Uruta, Matt Penland, and Connor Pelton. Every March, no matter what, we came up with a plan when our basketball team would make the tournament. And the final box is from football game number 488 that Lawrence worked. The 2020 Mountain West Championship football game in Las Vegas. We defeated Boise State that day, and Lawrence, working by himself because his staff was remote and he had to hire out for everything, accomplished the greatest publicity we could have for that team. We all helped him remotely, but he was the one that was there, and I was never so proud that he was able to experience that championship with that football team. Now, being here at South Carolina Stadium today, we committed a bit of a faux pas. We're serving fan cake at an outdoor event. If any of you know, fan cake was to be served at indoor events only. But let's hear about fan cake from the man himself.
You are looking live.
I remember Brent coming out and putting his arm around me at the practice field across the street. There's something you can tell me that nobody else knows.
But perhaps the greatest story at San Jose State is the one he cooked up on his own.
At home basketball games at the Civic Auditorium, we would either serve hot dogs or pizza. And we had one photographer who came regularly who didn't like hot dogs and didn't like pizza.
Ever the gracious host, Fan found something the photographer did like.
I had a cookbook that my mother gave me. I found a recipe for a cake, and I said, well, let me try to make this. It became a staple at all home basketball games. Came out of the oven at 8:15 this morning.
Since 1990, he's baked roughly 1,500 frosting-free fan cakes and sent a few to far-off places.
I actually got a call from Duke, and this was after Coach K had his back surgery. Baked the cake, shipped it FedEx. The pan fit in the box just right, and they had a cake 2 days later.
So we do hope you will enjoy your fan cake today. But I have to make a special introduction today. That photographer who's starting for working for Lawrence on his second day here at San Jose State, his freshman year, is here. Ron Freed, please stand. We have you to thank for the fan cake. So, as we eat our unique cake, inspired by a unique man, we realize that there will never be fan parking in our parking lot, only spectator parking. There will never be another Fort Granada on fire at 7th and Alma. And there will never be another genuine, caring, and devoted man as our unique man, Mr. Lawrence Fan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Charlie Foss. I'm the CFO here at San Jose State, and I'm also the chair of the San Jose Sports Authority. I've had the pleasure over the past 6 years to work with Lawrence here. But 20 years prior, I got to work with him on the Sports Hall of Fame for the city of San Jose. And I'm sure Mark Purdy will go through a little bit more of what Lawrence meant to that Hall of Fame committee and those recipients. Lawrence is a legend, and he added not just to this university, but to the whole city of San Jose. It was amazing when you would sit with him and learn the trivia, not just of all of our student athletes, of the things that happened here at San Jose State, but that happened throughout the city of San Jose. All the people who went into the San Jose Sports Hall of Fame can thank Lawrence for his dedication to detail that came out in those ceremonies. I want to try something a little different here. So I'm going to read a couple Bible verses and a little bit of servant leadership, because that's how I see Lawrence. So from Matthew 6:21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Clearly, Lawrence's heart was here at San Jose State. On servant leadership, what is the essence of servant leadership? The essential quality that sets servant leaders apart from leaders is that they live by their conscience. The inward moral sense of what is right and what is wrong. That one quality is the difference of leadership that works and leadership that endures. At heart, the individual is a servant first, making the conscious decision to lead in order to serve better and to serve others, not to increase their own power. The objective is to enhance the growth of individuals and the various teams and organization, increase teamwork and personal involvement. Those are Lawrence's traits. That's how Lawrence lived his life. So to me, it's because he used these gifts and the skills that he developed to spend his life caring for us and caring for others. In Romans 12:6, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. Lawrence was a trailblazer in many ways that you heard so far this morning. Our women athletes, our women's staff, Lawrence was the trailblazer for those folks. They were always first in his mind and making sure he lifted them up, gave them the platform that they deserve, and enabled them to stay up there. Matthew 25:23, well done, good and faithful servant. So here's the call to action that I have for you. Live your life as a servant leader. Lift others up that are around you. That would be, to me, the single best thing we could do to honor Lawrence. Last point. Whenever I'm on a road trip with one of our teams and I'm on the bus, I pass by the first seat on that bus. That's Lawrence's seat. We'll never forget that. And up in the press box, in the back left-hand corner, where I visited Lawrence every single game and spent time with him, that's his seat. and I will always walk by that seat, and I will always visit Lawrence every game that I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to this event. My and my family's sincerest, heartfelt condolences to the family of Lawrence Fan, to his university colleagues and friends, and to the student athletes he served and so dearly loved and respected. We already miss Lawrence, because he'd have told me and Mark Purdy, you guys are speaking last because we want to make sure that the other speakers have time to speak. On top of it, by the time you speak, everything that needs to be said, should be said, will have been said, and so you'll have to cut whatever you do have in half. So, out of respect to Purdy, who will be following me, in conclusion, let me say, no, I'm gonna take some of your time, Mark. There are those who appreciate their jobs and the relevance of what they do. Lawrence Fan considered his work a calling. He loved the institution he worked for, and I'm thoroughly convinced that he was in love with the people he served, especially the student athletes and coaches. My first formal encounter with Larry was when he invited me to speak to the football team. As we waited for the team to finish practice and gather in the meeting room, he pulled out a copy of The Sociology of Sport, my textbook in what was a new discipline when he took my course at Cal in the early 1970s. And he began to quote pages and analyses and questions raised, and to remark how insightful he thought it was that a 26-year-old would have put a book together like that in 1970. His praise became so effusive that I finally said, Larry, that guy you're talking about sounds like he's pretty special. If you ever get a chance, I'd love for you to introduce me to him. As I got to know Larry, it became very obvious that he always looked for and emphasized what he saw as the best in everyone that he encountered. He and I were meeting on some matter a couple of years later, and I remarked that the San Jose State quarterback had had a perfectly dreadful game. Couple of interceptions, put the ball on the ground once. And Larry's response was, but did you see that deep out pass that he completed? It was only about 25 yards in terms of the completion, but that ball must have traveled 40 yards in the air. He had to avoid the defensive end, the outside linebacker, and put it exactly where it had to be in order to keep the cornerback from intercepting it. It was then that I said to myself, so this is who Lawrence Fan is. He was never one to either define, perceive, or judge anyone by their worst moments, their worst day. He wasn't just doing his job. This was him. I ultimately came to realize that an enduring tenet of his relationships with people, and especially those he served in sports, in the sports business, where there are inevitably going to be errors and mistakes and heartbreaking losses and disappointments, was that it is support, uplift, and encouragement to inspire improvement that is imperative in tough times, not doubt. And again, he carried that perspective over into his relationships with people in general. And everyone admired and respected him for that. And that admiration and respect was national. When I was inducted into the Academic All-America Hall of Fame, largely as a result of Larry's advocacy, I showed up at the honors banquet with 4 guests that I didn't know would be attending, 4 students from Howard University. And so I hadn't registered them for dinner. So there was no table assignment, no dinners. Quote, with the sincere apologies of the hotel and the sponsoring organization. The guy at the door noted that I was an honoree, and he presumed that because I was on the faculty at Berkeley for 30 years, that I was there representing Berkeley. And then I corrected him. I said, no, I'm here as a San Jose State alum, and here largely because of the work and advocacy of Larry Fan. He didn't even hesitate. He turned around and said, hey, wait here, just a minute. 5 minutes later, the next thing we know, 2 guys are rolling a table in and setting it up about 12 feet from center stage and the speaker's podium. And his next words to me were, shall I take your dinner preferences here, or would you prefer to sit down at the table and review the menu? It was clear that I had said the magic word, Larry Fan. Larry cared so much and so deeply about San Jose State and the athletic programs he served that he had become a virtual living encyclopedia with regard to the athletes, their performances, and their legacies. I once mentioned the name of an athlete from the early 1960s. He wasn't a big name. He wasn't even a part of the speed part of Speed City. He was just a good athlete who ran on the distance relay team. Before I knew anything, Larry was telling me who all the other runners on the distance relay team were, what their times were, the meet where they set a national record, and how long the record stood. Larry Fan reduced the concept of dedication and commitment to paltry understatements, and in point of fact, to apply those to him was an insult. I have met great people throughout my career, mostly in the world of sports, people who viewed sports as more than just the toy department of human affairs, the sandbox of human relationships. Some of those individuals are fellow Spartan alums, like Tommy Smith and John Carlos and Lee Evans, Bill Walsh and Peter Uberoff, Coach Yoshida, greats such as Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Jim Brown and Wilma Rudolph, and coaches like Dale Brown and John Thompson and John Wooden of UCLA, and so many more. I put Lawrence Fan in that same pantheon of heroes and sheroes. Larry had a grasp of the significance and potential of sport and the people associated with it. And it was all so natural to him that you almost thought it was intuitive, that he didn't work and study and commit to that kind of understanding and knowledge of sport and the people involved in it. He saw in their day-to-day activities and in involvements a portrayal and projection not just of their commitments to their sports, but to the very best of who we are as a people and what we aspire to be as a nation. Every single day he saw in sports people making that contribution to forming that more perfect union. And Larry Fan epitomized that. It is futile to try to replace Larry. All that knowledge, all that commitment, those relationships that accumulated respect. But what we can hope for is that someone will honor his life and work by committing to follow the path that he has illuminated and to emulate the model of professionalism, caring, and competence that he epitomized. And still, Larry Fan will be sorely missed by all who had the privilege of knowing and working with him. Lawrence Fan, well done, my brother. You will not be forgotten.
Good morning. You know, Lawrence over the years gave me a lot of good advice. I think at one point he did tell me, if you're ever on a program where you have to follow Dr. Harry Edwards, don't agree to do it. That was great, Doc. My name is Mark Purdy. For 33 years, I was a sports columnist for the Mercury News. And over that time, of course, I had to interact with Lawrence a lot, as did so many others in my profession. I am so happy, but not surprised, that so many of them showed up today to honor Lawrence. My former boss, Bud Geraci, organized a group of former Mercury News, or of current Mercury News, and former Mercury News, and Bay Area News Group, and Bay Area media people to be here today. I don't know where they're sitting, but if Lawrence, you're up there looking, they're here because of the job you did making our jobs easier and also more fun. I want to make this as brief as possible, but I have a couple stories I want to tell. I should explain to the young student athletes here that my job, I worked at a newspaper. It's pieces of parchment with the ink on it, and you picked it up and read it. You didn't scroll through it. But then I realized here at San Jose State, student athletes may realize what that is, because if you went into Lawrence's office, there was piles of newspapers from floor to ceiling, and he knew what was in each one of them. You would say, what happened in that bowl game in 1986? And he would say, and reach in and pull it out. Here it is. And I think that all of us who worked with Lawrence over the years about stories about San Jose State, saw his dedication here, saw his loyalty here. At some point, I think we all asked, why is he so loyal? Why is he still working so hard here? What is he doing this? Because he is not a Spartan alum. He got his degree from UC Berkeley, and then, as his brother mentioned, ended up here. And he just had this attachment here that some of us we marveled at it. We admired it. We respected it so much. And I'll tell one story. Sometime in the 1980s, I'm covering a game at, I think it was a San Jose State UC Berkeley football game in Berkeley. And Dave Newhouse, who was a columnist for the Oakland Tribune and a Spartan alum, came up to me and said, you know, I think I know the job, the sports information job here in Berkeley is coming open. Lawrence is a Berkeley alum. I think he'd be really great for that job. We should talk to him about that. So after the game, after we'd done filing our stories, Lawrence stayed as usual. We went up to Lawrence and said, you know, Lawrence, we know the job here at Berkeley is coming open. We know you're alum. If you want to apply for that job, Dave and I will put in a good word and explain how much we respect your work here and how good a job you do, and if you want to apply for this job. And Lawrence did one of his, you know, Mark, Dave, thank you. I appreciate that. But my work is not done here at San Jose State A. Okay, and then I'm walking away with Dave, and I said, what does that mean? There are going to be football games here going on and on. There are going to be other sports events, all that. You know, what does it mean? His work is not done. And what I finally came to realize that and as I got to know Lawrence over the years, he wouldn't express it this way exactly, but I think he felt that they needed him here. They really needed him here. And he felt that need. And with all respect to Amy and the fine people working here, I think he felt that no one cared more. Other people may care as much, but no one cared more about San Jose State and San Jose State sports as he did. And that showed up in so many ways, including when the first NCAA basketball games were played at the arena downtown. San Jose State was the host school. Lawrence knew what that meant. He knew that as the host school, it was going to receive a lot of recognition for that, and things needed to run correctly in the press room, in the arena. Lawrence never went home that weekend. He stayed at the arena long after the games, long into the night, till finally they kicked him out. And he went out in the parking lot and slept in his car all night and came back in when it opened the first thing in the morning. He wanted to make sure things were just done exactly correctly. He understood our jobs. He understood the importance of details in assisting the media in our jobs. Charlie mentioned the details that he found important as he advocated on behalf of different San Jose State athletes and other athletes for the San Jose Sports Hall of Fame. He brought that attention to detail to everything. Whether that meant if I was going to go cover a San Jose State football game in Reno, and I was going to come in the day of the game, and I didn't know how I'd get my parking pass, he would say to me, meet me on the corner of 5th and whatever at this time, and I'll hand you over your parking pass. I did, and he did. But the best story to tell about to Lawrence in terms of his dedication happened in 2009. That year was Dick Tomey's last year's head football coach here. And he had done a good job resurrecting the program, taking it to a bowl game. And of course, Dick had had a great career before he got here at Arizona, at Hawaii. And this was the finish of his career. And so my boss, Bud Geraci, said, you know, you should go cover that last game of Dick Tomey's at San Jose State. The game was in Ruston, Louisiana, at Louisiana Tech. It was early December. I like covering college football, but I was not that excited to go to Louisiana Tech in early December. But my boss was right. He talked me into it. I called up Lawrence. I said, I'll be there. You know, where's the team staying? Where can I come and pick up my credentials? He told me. I said, okay, I'm flying in the day before the game. I flew to Houston, where I was supposed to catch a connecting flight to, I believe, Monroe, which is next door to Ruston. I get to Houston. It's snowing. It's a freak snowstorm, early December. The airport, we were the last plane to land. The airport shuts down. There are no more flights out. Everybody's got to leave the airport. Houston doesn't know how to deal with this snow. So I go to the counter. I said, in the morning, when can I get a flight to Monroe? They told me, well, not till noon. The football game was in the afternoon. That wasn't going to work. So I said, where's the rental counter? I go to the rental counter. I rent the car. And now I'm facing a 5-hour drive from Houston to Ruston in the snow through the Louisiana bayous. I call up Lawrence and said, Lawrence, I'm going to get in there real late. I'll just see you in the morning. Come by my hotel and get my credentials in the morning. I'm going to get in late. You go to bed. Lawrence said, well, okay. I drive the 5 hours. Now it's like 10:30, 11 at night. After this long drive, I'm not in a great mood. I pull into my hotel. I walk in the lobby. Lawrence is sitting there with my credentials. And he says to me, you know, I checked. There's a Chili's across the street. It's still serving. We can go there and have dinner. We did. He got me excited about the next day's game. And I thought, this guy, you know, San Jose State appreciates him. I hope they appreciate him as much as I do. That was part of the work he felt needed to be done. And I think some people mentioned, what can we do to honor this guy who was something. He was something. I have a few thoughts about that. I guess what I would do, because I'm going to challenge myself, but I'd challenge all of you to just care for maybe a few minutes, a few hours, a week or a month, to care about San Jose State and San Jose State sports, care as much about that as Lawrence did for 24/7. How do you do that? Well, I'm sure the development people would be glad if you wrote out a check to help build over there. But you don't need to write out a check to honor Lawrence that way. It would just mean go to a San Jose State athletic event of any sort. Think about Lawrence while you're there. He would be glad you're there. He would be delighted you were there. If you see an athlete on the field, off the field, in the classroom, encourage that athlete in the positive way that Lawrence would. You can do that. If you could help him get a job in the summer, you know, Lawrence would love that. If you see a high school senior, athlete or non-athlete, who is choosing, do I want to go to school at San Jose State or do I want to go to school at Fresno State? Tell him to go to San Jose State. That's what Lawrence will like. And I don't know all the ins and outs of the new name, image, and likeness rules, but there's a compliance officer in the San Jose State Athletic Department, or you could call one of the coaches' offices, Coach Brennan or whatever, and see maybe you can help that way. I don't know if it means having an athlete come out and give your kid golf lessons, whatever, you know, something to support the athletic program here. Lawrence would love that. There's one other thing I would ask you to do. All those years, Lawrence supervised the media coverage here and covered the thing. He got to see a lot of people get standing ovations for the jobs they did on the athletic field here. I wonder if just now, because I'm wrapping this up, if just for the next 30 seconds, we could stand and give Lawrence a standing ovation. Thank you. That was great. I see Crazy George Henderson is here. I wish he had his drum so we could beat the drum for Lawrence. Yeah, But that's it, except Lawrence, if you're up there, look what you did today. You brought all these people together to honor you, but also to honor the place you loved. To talk about San Jose State sports, support San Jose State sports, on and on. Lawrence, your work is done. Thank you.
That, in a lot of ways, seems like a perfect segue because we have an opportunity now for everyone here in attendance to get involved in some way, shape, or form. One of the ways is that there is announcing an internship under Lawrence Fan for Media Relations. You can get involved. Information's on the video board. It's announced by our athletic director, Jeff Konya, and the senior staff. Dom Urrutia can take your information down if you'd like to get involved in that way to honor Lawrence with an internship. Another way to honor Lawrence, and I know this is going to be difficult for some, but we're going to open the mic up here, and if there's a staff member or a friend or someone that knew Lawrence that wants to say something about Lawrence briefly, I know that's difficult, I know that's challenging, but we open the mic up to you now.
You know, the tall folks always leave the microphone up, so got to lower it for myself. Condolences, first of all, my sincere condolences for the Fan family. So nice to see everybody here. My name is Ron Freed. Some of you may know me as Abdul, which is an old nickname, which is a story I will actually get to in a moment. But Lawrence and I essentially grew up at San Jose State. He came here in 1980. I came here as a student fresh out of high school in August of 1981. And actually, I met Lawrence on the first day of my freshman day at San Jose State. And the story went that I was a photographer in high school, and I was interested in still doing photography. So I went to Joe Swan, who was the photojournalism advisor at the time, and I said, how can I take pictures for the Spartan Daily? I'm not in the program. And he said, well, we don't really take people, but why don't you check with Lawrence Fan in the Sports Information Office? So, being a freshman, I didn't know any better. I walked down from journalism to where our old athletics were, which were on campus at the time. And sure enough, Lawrence is there in his office. And I walk in and I say, my name is Ron Freed. I'd like to take pictures for you. Now, most people who are busy people like Lawrence would have just ignored me and said, I don't have time, we got people, don't worry about it. He actually stopped what he was doing and spent about 5 or 10 minutes talking with me and looking at my work. And then after he finished talking, he said, come with me. And we walked down the hall to the trainer's office, where I believe Charlie Miller was the trainer at the time. And he said to Charlie, Charlie, I'd like you to meet Ron Freed. He has volunteered to be a photographer for us. And now 2 thoughts crossed my mind is first, this is an amazing opportunity. I mean, first year of my freshman day, and I get a chance to be a college sports photographer. The other thing that crossed my mind is, wait a moment, I volunteered? And that started a relationship, both a working and friendship relationship with Lawrence that has carried on from that day in 1981 all the way through the end of this past football season. So about 40 some odd years. So he was a tremendous mentor to me, tremendous friend, tremendous boss. But I'll relay 2 other quick stories. So where did that name Abdul come from? Because, listen, I'm a short Jewish kid. Abdul is not quite a name you would figure that would be associated with me. And it happened to be that I was in the athletic department office with Lawrence, in the SID office, and one day in the 80s, Bill Berry, who was our basketball coach at the time, comes walking in. And I had used to go out, and after the basketball games at the Civic, I'd grab a basketball and I'd start shooting hoops. And so Lawrence started calling me World B. Freed, as opposed to World B. Free. So he was going to tell that to Bill, and he said, Bill, you know, Ron's got a new nickname. And before he had a chance to say anything, Bill said, Abdul. And that is what stuck with Lawrence. So from that point on, anytime he would introduce me to anybody else, he would always say, and this is Abdul. So I've got SIDs and coaches and athletes who only know me as Abdul. And every time he said it, you could see the smile come up because he got the in-joke. So that's the kind of person that he did have, that sense of humor and that generosity. And then to Amy's story, one last point about the fan cake. So first of all, I actually do eat hot dogs. And in the old Civic days, Lawrence would bring a pizza for the media to eat before games. Well, I don't eat cheese, so I don't eat pizza, so I would work my way up to the concession stand and buy my hot dogs or my hamburgers, and I think Lawrence felt bad for me, that I was sitting there having to pay for my own food all the time. So he figured out, well, what can I give Ron that he'll eat? And that's where the fan cake came up. And I didn't really know that I was the inspiration for the cake until I actually heard it in a story. And even in that story that we showed where he said, and there was some photographer in the 80s who was a picky eater. I said, well, that's me. I was the picky eater. And I was there in the 80s. That must be me. So thank you, Lawrence, for all the fan cakes. Thank you for all the wonderful memories, for all the drives that we did and all the times in the big car that we'd make all those road trips. I can't say enough about him as a friend, as a mentor, and just an overall wonderful person. So thank you.
I'll make it kind of quick, but I'll be honest, I just flew in from Michigan, so I'm enjoying whatever this is up here in the sky. But I was the equipment manager here from 1990 to 1999, and back in those days, our one-person operations, so Lawrence, myself, our trainer, Charlie Miller, spent a lot of time with each other. And Mark, you struck a chord in me when you talked about following Dr. Edwards. Charlie told me my first year, whatever you do, when you go to a team meeting, do not follow Lawrence. You have no chance. And it was true. My first meeting in 1990, Lawrence looked out to the team. He took a giant book of law and dropped it on the ground. He grabbed a pipe wrench and dropped it on the ground, and then a desk fan. And then he went, law, wrench, fan, law, wrench, fan. And the players knew his name, the new players. The following year, this guy had the audacity to Caesar's Palace, Evander Holyfield championship fight. He flew in a parachute with a giant fan into the ring. You guys can Google it, but Lawrence was a little bit affronted because there was truly only one fan man. So, of course, that year at the meeting, he had the fan on his back. He had a Superman costume with an F instead of an S. Back when Arnold Schwarzenegger was an actor before he was the governor, the Terminator series was out, and Lawrence came dressed as the Terminator. And he looked at our no-nonsense coach, Terry Shea, and said, "Hasta la vista, baby." And Coach Shea just looked at him and said, "I got no idea what you're talking about, Lawrence." But Lawrence, I just miss those times when I'd ask him how he's doing, and he'd say, "Well, Gary, Thursday I'm off to Northridge for women's basketball, Friday to baseball in Bakersfield, and Saturday back here for the men's game," all in that Oldsmobile. And then I'll end it with our trip to Hawaii. So back as an equipment, I'm going to let you in a little secret for you non-sports people in here. The team travel is a little bit overrated. It's really buses, planes, hotels, stadiums, or arenas. But Hawaii was different. See, in the old Aloha Stadium in the 90s, they had high school games there all day. So we would have to fly over on Thursday night, and then Friday morning we'd have to practice at 10, and then there was no locker room to set up, no helmet, shoulder pads to work on, because they're having the high school games. So we put all our stuff in storage, and we actually had a day, not in Las Cruces, not in Ruston, not in Logan, but Honolulu. But not Lawrence. He wasn't at Waikiki Beach. He was still here, because why waste the day, when there's work to be done? So he would take advantage of the time change, fly to Hawaii Saturday afternoon for the game, and then with pride tell me after the game at the airport, well, a new record, Gary, 5 hours and 23 minutes in Honolulu. So as we talk about what we can do to remember Lawrence, I'll be honest, my going away party was at his house some 25 years ago, and we said we'd stay in touch, and it got more sporadic over the years. So all of us, I think, should take time to think about somebody in your life, an old colleague, an old friend, an old family member you haven't talked to in a while, and give them a call while you still can. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'll be brief. My name is Mike Chism. I worked here for 17 years, which meant I worked with Lawrence for 17 years. And when I first applied for the job at San Jose State, they flew me in, and this was back in 2000, so you could be greeted at the airport by someone, and as soon as I got off the airplane, there's this gentleman with a tie on, and it had my name on it, and he was laughing, and it was Lawrence, who I'd never met, although I'd heard a lot about him. So we got my suitcase, went to the parking garage, there was that Ford Granada. And as we opened the trunk to put my suitcase in, there was a case of oil with a couple of cans missing. And he proudly said, it eats a lot of oil, but it's got over 300,000 miles on it. So that was my introduction to Lawrence. And when I think of Lawrence, sorry, I'm really nervous. I think about airports and buses, because for 11 years I did the football and basketball games. And on every road trip, Lawrence would rent a car and he would take me to the ball games. So not only do I have amazing stories that Lawrence shared with me, stuck in traffic. Gary mentioned the trips to Hawaii. I think I went 17 times with Lawrence. And we always ate at the Rainbow Diner in Honolulu. But that also means that 12 to 15 times I was in Ruston and Las Cruces, New Mexico, and all of the places in the Mountain West Conference and the WAC back then. And he loved going to Moscow, Idaho, and he loved going to Logan. And he had favorite places to eat in every one of these towns. And he would take me to the Bluebird Cafe in Logan. He would take us to the Sputter in Tulsa. Darren knows that. Or the Cattleman's Steakhouse in El Paso. And he enjoyed taking myself, anyone else that was in our traveling party, and take us to his favorite eating establishments. And then one quick note, his sister brought up music. A lot of people don't know what Lawrence's music taste was. But there was a day when the basketball team went before us to Bakersfield. So Lawrence and I drove to Bakersfield. And I don't think we said a word because he had just received his box set of Johnny Cash music. So when I hear Johnny Cash, I'll think of Lawrence. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Hello, my name is Bob Judgevinsky. Let me back up from the mic because it's too much of an echo. All right. So I was here at San Jose State from 1989 to 1995. When I was a senior in high school, Terry Shea was one of my mom's real estate clients, and my mom was telling him about how I was doing public address announcing work and statistician work at my high school, and wanted to continue doing the same kind of work at San Jose State. And Terry Shea's advice to my mom was 5 words: have him call Lawrence Fan. So that summer, when I was down here for orientation, I went by his office for what I thought was an interview. And I was a little nervous because I had never interviewed well for other jobs I had applied for back home. But when I got into his office, right away I could tell that this was not an interview. It was more of an exercise to welcome me to San Jose State, explain what the sports information department was all about. And over the years, I would end up working for him in various capacities, on the stat crew for the basketball games and the press box of the football games, as the public address announcer for the soccer and gymnastics games, or gymnastics meets, and as a student assistant in his office. And along the lines of him being a consummate professional, back in those days, we would send messages to other people using fax machines. It wasn't good enough for him to simply see the light on the fax machine that the fax had gone through. He wanted me to call the folks that the fax was being sent to confirm that they got the fax. In the years since I've left San Jose State, on several occasions, he has called me back to work on the stat crew for the basketball games and as a TV statistician for the football games. He could have simply just emailed me, but he would always make it a point to call me. And it wasn't just a call to go through the motions of finding someone to work as a statistician. To him, it was a big deal if I could be available to work for him at the game. So I appreciate how he always made me feel important and welcome at San Jose State athletic events. And I appreciate everything you did for San Jose State over the years. Thank you.
Afternoon. I'm Doug O. I want to thank Dr. Stephen and Sister Lillian for getting everyone together. Lillian's story is how I want to start my speech, because Lawrence said the same thing to me that he said to Lillian. In summer of 2021, we were coming out of COVID. I asked Lawrence how much longer he envisioned working, and he said the same thing. I don't have any plans to retire. This is my job. This is my life. I wouldn't even know what else to do. But in his eyes, though, I could see that, like a salmon swimming upstream, he knew that, time was getting shorter. But no one ever thought it would come to an end like this. I was talking to Amy Villa and we saw Lawrence about 7 o'clock on one night, and then he said he was going to go up to his parents' house to check the mail and take out the garbage like he always did. And then we saw Lawrence walk down the hallway and get in his car and take off. Fast forward 24 hours later, Amy says, can you drive by Lawrence's house? I go, what happened? He goes, Lawrence didn't come to work. What? So I called, and when he done, I said, meet me at Lawrence's house. She's like, why? Oh, well, Lawrence didn't come into work. And she's like, that's weird. He never misses work. So we were there from like 8 till 10 at night in front of Lawrence's house trying to figure out what to do. It was very odd. And then I sat there and I called Amy about 10 o'clock on the driving home, and she said, why don't you stop by the office? Maybe he came back into town and he's working. 10 o'clock at night, that wouldn't be too unusual for Lawrence. And I went by about 10:30. I called Amy. I said, oh, he's not working on the media guide. So then I told Wendy the same story, and she contacted the police. And as we said, that's put the conclusion to that chapter. Lawrence was the ultimate public servant. He loved San Jose State. He gave at San Jose State everything he had to give until I had nothing left to give.
Well, my name is Crazy George, and my voice is destroyed right now. So I hope you can understand what I'm saying. I came here to honor Lawrence Fan, and I thought, how could I do that? He was a wonderful, thoughtful person that I loved. I really did. He was so great to me. So what I did and what I thought of is to wear this sweater. This is the sweater you're presented when you are inducted into the San Jose State Hall of Fame. And Lawrence Fan was the man that pushed me so hard and wanted me in the Hall of Fame so bad, and the man that has actually more joy out of it than I got out of it when I was inducted. I love this man for what he did. This is just a little insight. He had more pleasure for me going into the Hall of Fame than I had, and I loved being inducted. I waited 50 years. San Jose State put me in. It's the biggest honor of my life. But Lawrence was so good to me, and he had more pleasure out of, I think, than I had. So thank you for being here to honor Lawrence Fan, because I love honoring him, and I want to give him 3 cheers for Lawrence Fan. Go Lawrence, go Lawrence, go Lawrence. I love you. Thank you, everybody.
Good afternoon. I'm going to claim that I have known Lawrence Fan longer than the majority of you who are here today. I'm Otis Watson. I'm the senior class president of Lowell High School for 1972. I was Lawrence class president. And the story doesn't begin there. It kind of begins when Lawrence joined my committee to help me get elected for senior class president. And I was popular at Lowell, ran track, forensics, public speaking, head cheerleader, but I was not the most popular white boy or white young man in our class. In fact, the most popular white guy in our class did not even campaign because he knew he had it. Lawrence told me, the way we're going to beat him is this way. You're going to go to the cafeteria, and there's different parts at the Lowell cafeteria. The Asians sit in one area, Hispanics sit in another area, African Americans sit in another area, and everyone else is in the middle. Everyone's playing cards, playing dominoes. You're going to tell them you are running for class president, senior class president, and if they don't already have a choice, you would appreciate their vote. And then he told me, you also must go to the pit. Now, the pit at Lowell High School was the area, notorious. That's where you smoked dope, you drank beer, and you did anything else that was illegal. So I went to the pit. I went to all these areas, and make a long story short, I was elected class president. That was 50 years ago. We're having our 50th reunion in November this year. But I must tell you that one gentleman who I beat, the 10-year, the 20-year, the 30-year, the 40-year reunion, he's come up to me each time and said, hey, Otis, how you doing? Hey, man, you still look good. But I got to ask you, how did you beat me in that election back at Lowell? Thank you, Lawrence. Appreciate your love.
Wow. On behalf of San Jose State Athletics, the university, the Fan family, Thank you, everyone, for showing up today. It was a tremendous, tremendous honoring of such a great individual. As a token of the appreciation of the longtime worker that Lawrence was, San Jose State Athletics admin would like to announce that he will be the sole inductee to the San Jose State Sports Hall of Fame later this fall. And finally, before we go, we heard a lot of the theme of respect today for Lawrence. And I think of respect as a term that stand-up gentlemen, and that's thrown around quite a bit these days, but no one else really exemplifies that other than Lawrence. Every time I left that press box, Lawrence would stand up. Every time any media member left the press box, Lawrence would stand up. So now I'm asking that for the final time, after a man that called this place home for 42 years, we all stand one last time for Lawrence. And thank you again for coming out today.